Today, we're starting the Jubilee Walkway with section 1. Jubilee Walkway was originally opened in 1977 during the Silver Jubilee celebrations for Elizabeth II. The idea was to connect a lot of London's major tourist attractions, and there were 6 stages to start off with. It's now been rebooted in 2002 as the Jubilee Walkway, dropping the Silver Jubilee, but it now has a 7th loop which goes up through Camden. So the first one is actually by far the biggest. Overall it's 15 miles, first one's 6 miles in length, starts in Leicester Square by the statue of Shakespeare and heads down to the National Gallery. Unfortunately, the cut through between the old National Gallery building and the Sainsbury wing has been closed off for refurbishment of the National Gallery, so we had to do a little detour around the side of the building. So now we're emerging into Trafalgar Square. Over there you can see St Martin in the Fields. That's because this was the edge of the City of London, so it was the first church outside of London in the Fields. Obviously that's long gone now. And you've got Trafalgar Square here, opened in the 1840s. The 4th plinth here holds a rotating artwork. The others have been fixed for many years. And here is Nelson's column with a statue of Nelson, the victor at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1806, commemorated by this square. You have Canada House behind me, and over to the left you'd see South Africa House. Here is Uganda House ahead of us, and there's a statue of Charles I on horseback, just at the beginning of the Strand. And we're making our way round to Admiralty Arch, which actually was an Admiralty building. It's now being turned into a hotel, so it's completely covered with scaffolding. From this side you can't see anything at all. If you ever watched some of the old Roger Moore James Bond movies, that's where he was, because he was part of naval intelligence officially. You still have naval buildings over there. The green domed building is naval. That's why it has all the antennas on it. And the Mall galleries here have a lovely exhibition of wildlife photography, amateur wildlife photography, and a rotating display of artworks. And we're just walking down the Mall slightly towards Buckingham Palace. The reason the road's red is actually because there's so many horses walk on it. It has a special mixture of tarmac. But as we head across here to the Artillery Monument, we're heading to the edge of Queen's Park. Looking back, you can see that rather austere looking building covered in creepers and ivy. That's actually a Second World War bunker that was never demolished and still appears to be in very heavy use, and there's YouTube channels on that cover that in a lot of detail. Here's Horse Guards Parade, and they're preparing for one of the ceremonies held there. The Olympics held the beach volleyball in that square, which was lovely. Here, walking through Queen's Park, you get a view down the lake past the pelicans, and if you're lucky you don't get mugged by the squirrels, who seem very happy with themselves here. A lot of swans and wildlife. Really doesn't feel like central London. As you head down here past Duck Island, and a series of lakes and fountains, and you can snatch views of Buckingham Palace down at the far end of the park. Really is a beautiful spot. Doesn't at all feel like you're in the centre of Zone 1. Then we head over the road here by the Barley Memorial for the people who died in the Barley atrocities. And then we're heading down past the Inland Revenue as we make our way back towards Westminster. So we're going to be heading past Westminster, over the bridge, back along the South Bank, and then up across the Millennium Footbridge. So you really do take in a lot of the sights. If you want to do a 6-mile walk, this is probably the best stretch to do to see all the key sites of central London. Heading down here, you can see Big Ben. Obviously, that's not actually Big Ben. It's actually the clock tower. Big Ben is the nickname for the Big Bell. It's actually named after a famous boxer. We're passing there one of the markers for the Jubilee Walkway with the effigy, if you like, of St Paul's. Heading over to Parliament Square here, there's statues of famous parliamentarians, politicians, Churchill, Mahatma Gandhi, Disraeli, Mandela, all sorts of famous political figures. Over there you can see Westminster Abbey, which we just skirt along the side of. The beautiful St Margaret's Church there on the right, a Victorian masterpiece inside, very beautiful. And you can see over there the London Eye in the distance. Now we're heading through the political portion of London, past the Houses of Parliament and Commons, and you could see Cromwell Green is to the left there, statue of Richard the Lionheart just disappearing behind the bus. And on the right hand side here in this side area, you kind of call it a parking lot really, but it's technically a road, is the Jewel Tower, which is an English heritage site you can visit. And looking back there, you can see the Gothic masterpiece of Parliament. There's the Jewel Tower itself. Very small site, well worth a visit. And this is the green. If you ever watch parliamentary interviews, they're often standing here next to the Henry Moore statue with Parliament in the background. And there's a series of media companies based in these buildings just here. And we're heading across the road. We're going to make our way into Victoria Gardens South, which is a small park that's part of the parliamentary estate. As you make your way in, if you turn to the left, you can see the Victoria Tower, and you can't really see them very well. Behind that bin in the distance is the Burghers of Calais. It's a copy of the very famous Rodin statue, which you can see in Calais itself. It commemorates when we killed the Burghers of Calais and let the people of Calais live. Obviously a very important message for our politicians in being nice to other countries. We walk down the end here. There's a famous fountain, but unfortunately it's being serviced at the moment. Beautiful views over the river. We're going to make our way over Lambeth Bridge, which this particular walk was really challenged with a lot of roadworks, so there were a lot of diversions. We're just going to make our way around here. And we're just heading across to Lambeth Bridge. And walking across Lambeth Bridge, you get a good view down the river. You can see the MI6 building, a lot of Vauxhall and more modern architecture that's probably mainly forgotten. Probably not the most famous of architecture. Yeah, that's Millbank Tower on the right there. Down in the river is actually a rather space age looking dock for boats that you can take down the river. As we head over Lambeth Bridge, on the south side you can see a church tower behind those sort of obelisk detailings. Fortunately, roadworks had to go underneath the bridge rather than cross on the top. That Millbank Tower over there, that's where a lot of businesses and also political parties have been based over the years. Labour Party certainly used to have their headquarters there at one point. Now here we can see Lambeth Palace, which is the London residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and just behind it is the Garden Museum. Must confess, I've never actually been in the Garden Museum. It seems rather small for the amount of money they charge. And we're heading down here. There's a beautiful memorial to SOE, the Special Operations Executive, who carried out espionage activities inside Europe against the Germans. and features Violette Chasbo, who was a married to a Hungarian and fought for Britain very valiantly, but unfortunately was captured, and after she was tortured they sent her to a concentration camp. Down here is the COVID memorial wall with hearts representing people who died of COVID. It's the National Memorial. Faces over towards Parliament, and this is the edges of Guy's Hospital. You probably want to walk on this side because that's where the doctors and nurses and staff go to smoke over the wall. But a very striking memorial here. A lot of the hearts feature names. It's quite touching. And obviously to the left you have stunning views of Parliament, and you can see the Houses of Parliament, and particularly on the river there's the bars and restaurants where the members, the MPs and Lords, enjoy their dinners. Probably a good spot for the COVID memorial, some might say. Actually, one of the best views of Parliament, if you can get it clear of people, is in the archway back there looking over at Frames Parliament. Then heading down past City Hall, and this is where the South Bank proper starts. You have the London Aquarium, the Shrek Experience, and the London Dungeon are all based here now. In what used to be City Hall before the London Authority was abolished, before coming back, we'll probably see it on another walk at the London Assembly Building. Here's the London Dungeon. Ahead of us is the London Eye. If you want a small diversion, if you turn to the right, walk 2 roads back and cross over, there's a alley that goes in a tunnel underneath Westminster Station that's always painted with fresh graffiti that could be quite a good photo opportunity. But we're going to head down here through the Jubilee Gardens, where there's some lovely views of the London Eye, and certainly a lovely spot to take a break when you're traipsing around London. We head down here towards the Hungerford Footbridge. It's one of the older footbridges on this stretch of the river. Takes you over to Embankment Tube, and I'd say on the other side offers very good views, particularly in the morning. On this side, probably at sunset, there's beautiful views of the River Thames if you're looking to take a photo. But we'll head underneath this bridge and past the South Bank Centre and National Theatre, which are sort of cultural icons, but in a very brutalist style on the South Bank. This is where the Skylon was. It was a suspended sky needle that was famous during the Festival of Britain. These were built during that period. Here there's another dock where you can take boats down the river. Good point to drop on. And also the Hayward Gallery there often has interesting exhibitions. On the right there's a skate park that's been preserved for decades despite various plans to change it. Now we're heading down to Waterloo Bridge. This always reminds me of the song Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks, and you certainly get that if you walk over it. Here there's a book market with regular stalls selling a mixture of pulp fiction and vintage books. Always quite interesting, a little bit on the pricey side. Here is the National Theatre, and just there was a statue of Laurence Olivier in his role as Hamlet. There's a lovely little bar on the right hand side there if you're on this stretch in the evening, because it's a little bit of a drinker's desert, this bit. But some striking views here of the north bank of the embankment, and over there you can see St Paul's in the distance. Heading here down towards Gabriel's Wharf, which has a large number of eateries. It's a good place to eat if you want a pleasant London vibe on a summer's day, although it's a little stuck between tube stations, between Waterloo and Southwark on the river. There is a beach here, which if the tide's out, you can go and either beachcomb or just walk along the riverside. I think for the best views from the beach, actually down near Tate Modern or down by Tate Britain are both very good spots for a view. And there's a couple of these old piers sticking out into the river that you can walk down to get a view. And you can see back down there to Waterloo Bridge and towards Parliament. But we're not going to stick around. We're straight onto the Oxo Tower. There's actually a marker here for the Jubilee Walkway. There's been a lot of renovations of the pavements, and I seem to recall there being more signage for this walk many years ago. It is at points a little tricky to find your way, and particularly TfL have removed the instructions about 6 or 7 years ago for most of their walks and handed them over to a mobile app, which if you're signed in is a pretty good mobile app. Go jauntily. Unfortunately, if you're a tourist without a mobile connection, TfL deleted all of the very helpful PDFs that told you how to do these walks. Just heading down here past Sea Container's house, very plush modern office block. Used to have Inland Revenue there at one point, and I can tell you has excellent views from the roof if you ever get the opportunity to visit the restaurant there. Here's Blackfriars Bridge. We're going to go past Doggett's on the right, which has a good beer garden at the back. Lovely tile decoration here with views of the bridge and the river. To the left is actually the piers of the old Blackfriars Railway Bridge. And as you come through here, you want to catch the beautiful mural on the wall there, which has become a bit of an iconic image in London of the River Thames. This is Blackfriars Bridge, the longest series of solar-powered panels on a bridge in Europe. And you might remember that from the Mission Impossible film where Tom Cruise did his sprint across the river to get Tate Modern. And right in front of us is Tate Modern, which was actually the South Bank power station that sat empty for decades. And now the turbine halls have all been cleared out. There's a very large collection of modern art. And if you're at all partial to modern art, well worth a visit here. Heading down to the Millennium Footbridge here. Just behind it is the Globe Theatre, which I definitely recommend for a summer's day. It's good to go and get a £5 or £10 ticket to stand and watch a show. It's some of the best Shakespeare in Britain. There's a beautiful view of St Paul's ahead of you. As you can see, it gets very busy on this bridge and this stretch. The South Bank is very popular these days. I would recommend seeing this stage in the evening. And particularly this bridge is beautiful after the sunset. As you come across to St Paul's and everything's lit up, it's a very beautiful view, and you'll just be dodging a few people with tripods doing long exposures. This was the wobbly bridge for a few weeks before it was closed, because when it initially opened, the dampers weren't quite set right. It was wobbling. On the right there is Samuel Pepys Bar, which has a balcony over the river that's well worth going there for a fish and chips in the evening. And if you cast your eye to the right there, you can see a church. It's actually just a church tower, which is the only thing surviving of St Mary Somerset, which was one of Wren's churches in London. As we head up towards Wren's masterpiece in London, St Paul's Cathedral was destroyed by the Great Fire in 1666 and rebuilt as this wonderful and iconic St Paul's Cathedral. just passing there the memorial to the firemen in the Blitz. And we'll make our way over. Well worth a visit to St. Paul's. We're going to go past the tourist information buildings, very modern addition to this area. Although, actually, been there about 30 years that I can think of. And here the frontage of St. Paul's and the obligatory statue of Queen Victoria. Round here is a good spot to grab lunch if you haven't eaten already, because you start getting into more windy roads. We're heading down towards Farringdon Road, and there's another one of Wren's churches on the right there. We're passing the Thameslink station on the left hand side, which, well, it's not the most beautiful of stations in London for sure, but it's a very busy one at certain times of day during the week. And a good way of getting up to Luton Airport or down to Brighton from here. Here as we cross, you can just see the church spire on the left hand side, if I hadn't turned. That's actually St. Bride's, which kind of looks like a wedding cake, the tears of a wedding cake, people say. Beautiful church, well worth a visit. They have very good musical presentations there. We're heading down Fleet Street now. That's back of St. Bride's Church, and you can just see a bit of it through the buildings, but you really have to go down the side streets to get to it. Fleet Street, very famous for publications. This is where pretty much every famous British newspaper was based for well over a century. But in the 80s they started moving out, and it didn't take very long before they were all gone. Now it seems to be perpetually in a state of development, with constant construction, buildings being knocked down and rebuilt. But a lot of interesting features here. There's the old Cheshire Cheese pub, very old pub. The Mary Queen of Scots building, which basically has no association with Mary Queen of Scots at all, but does have a beautiful frontage which makes it look a lot older than it is. Here's St. Dunstan's in the west, I believe another of Wren's churches. Very beautiful. I would recommend going to St. Dunstan's in the east. It's a bombed out church which is very striking and has become a park. We're going to turn up before the Royal Courts of Justice and head up the side streets here, just to wind our way round the back of the Royal Courts of Justice. Royal Courts of Justice are where the law courts are. Here is some of the Inns of Court where barristers are based. The Law Society is here on the left, with this very plush building with a swanky restaurant and those golden lions. Now heading down the back, if you were to head north, you get up towards the British Museum, or a little bit to the east of it. This is the back of the law courts. Some very old antique shops and a row of the old, very beloved British Telecom phone boxes. Just on the right here, there's a memorial to Sir Thomas More. And we're heading up towards Lincoln Inn Fields, which is one of the most beautiful of the parks in a square that date back centuries within London. And it's opposite Lincoln's Inn, which is where most of the barristers' chambers are. And certainly well worth a look. You can wander through, don't make too much noise or fuss, and you can have a little stroll through there. But we're going to head through Lincoln's Inn Field. On the left-hand side is the Hunterian Museum at the Royal College of Surgeons. Now, if you watch, I did a video a few months ago about the Hunterian on the south side, which is an excellent museum, well worth a visit. And on the right side of the square, the north side, is the Sir John Soanes Museum, which has a very eclectic collection of interesting and bizarre architectural details. When I came, this was very quiet. Now, a couple of months later, well into the spring, it was buzzing with activity of students from the London School of Economics just down to the south, and a series of universities up here to the north here. We're going to turn left to make our way through back towards where we started. We still got to get through Covent Garden, Seven Dials. It's just making our way over High Holborn. You've got Holborn Station to the north there. And there's a very good My Old Dutch. It's a Dutch pancake shop just to the north there. Goes back many years. Here's the Royal Masonic Lodge. This is actually where the FA held their first meeting, so there's a series of plaques for that. And this is the main home lodge for the Freemasons in Britain, particularly in London. Very striking building. Just heading swiftly on, because this is the largest and longest of these stretches. The subsequent sections of this walk are a lot quicker, and we'll probably put several in a video and it will still be shorter. Another set of phone boxes. Can't miss out on the traditional phone boxes and a trip to London. Now here we're getting through into Covent Garden, and this is the Royal Opera House where the Royal Ballet and Opera are based. There's a beautiful ironworks glass house in the centre of it, which is actually best in view from this side. I don't think it looks as good from the Covent Garden side. But we'll come round the back of that, and we're just going to cross over past these minis who are offering tours of London, and entering properly through Theatreland here into Covent Garden. This is Covent Garden as most people think of it. Two squares with restaurants downstairs, shops along ground floor, and upstairs fancy restaurants and eateries. And there's always entertainment. There's always someone doing magic trick, or there was an opera singer here as we walked through. Often beautiful cello or a quartet playing down, particularly on this side here. Very good at Christmas when they have the decorations hanging out. Before we emerge here, facing St. Paul's Church, for many years this was the only spot where buskers could legally perform in London, but that's been eased as you're now allowed to, provided you get a licence and prove you can perform to a certain standard. TfL will now allow you to perform in some streets and particularly on tube networks. Heading down here towards the Seven Dials area. Lovely area. I actually prefer walking around there to Covent Garden. I think that's just up to the north. Particularly around Christmas time, beautiful decorations. And we wind through some streets with interesting shops, and particularly bookshops, some very old bookshops here. Through very old alleyway, and coming out into the sunlight, winding our way through. And here's a series of bookshops, a lot of very old and vintage and collectible books here. Didn't stop off for too long. I've got to get on to Leicester Square, but we are very close to the end of Leicester Square here now. And this definitely will be the longest of these walk videos because it's far longer than the other stages. We're just going to turn down here and past Foyles. It actually finishes this section close to Leicester Square, but not quite where we started again. Very close to Cass Art here. Ahead of you there's the National Portrait Gallery we visited a few months ago. I hope you've enjoyed this first section of a Jubilee Walkway, and do subscribe and join us for future stages and walks around London and Britain.